Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the content show Who Would Have Thought We'd Make It? I'm Simon Kearney from Click to View, and today we're talking about the fragmentation of media and how the traditional media brand is in decline, and the personal media brand, for instance, and the corporate media brand are in the ascendancy. Just look at the deal that Joe Rogan did with Spotify to his podcast. He signed an exclusivity deal with Spotify. Taken his podcast off YouTube, for instance. $100 million, and he's got like one staff member. Joe Rogan is an example of the personal media brand that's eclipsing a traditional media brand. And then there's this whole, what I'm calling the middle class of media. There's this whole group of individuals who are now making an income by niche newsletters using platforms like Substack. And have you seen the app Cameo? It's amazing. There's like thousands of B-grade celebrities and sports stars and musicians. Actually, some of them are absolute world famous legends are selling personal video messages on this app called Cameo. It's the whole world of media, influencer, celebrity is just being turned on its head, and it's really interesting. Donald Trump is trying to take his massive audience from Twitter over to an app as well. And we're anecdotally hearing that B2B media traffic is surging as the decline of the traditional media continues. Where does corporate content fit in that? Well, I think it's going to become another pillar. Corporate content was always an also-ran in the media landscape, but not anymore. So today I'm talking to Geoff Spencer, who edits Microsoft's Asia Newsroom, about his shift from being a long-time journalist and foreign correspondent to becoming a corporate storyteller. I'm also talking to Stephen Brook, who was a media writer for the Guardian newspaper and the Australian newspaper. Stephen and I worked together covering Aussie politics about 20 years ago in Canberra, in a vastly different media landscape. So Stephen and I are also talking about how this shift is going on from the traditional media brand to the personal media brand. First up, I talked to Geoff about what the transition has been like from journalism to corporate storytelling.
Basically, it's like the T-shirt you buy in Sukhumvit in Bangkok that says same but different. So it's you take with you some of the skills that you use in news production and news reporting, and you lay off some of the other skills.
In the now fragmented world of media, Microsoft sees itself filling a gap.
If the traditional media is straining and dying, or whatever you want to put it, but it's certainly reducing, it's shrinking. We have to sort of pick up the slack ourselves and do some work. Now, I think that's happening on a bigger and bigger scale as we move ahead.
They're very serious about journalistic values like accuracy, authenticity, and clarity.
It's in the best interests of yourself, professionally, and in the company that you're working for, to maintain some editorial standards and some journalistic ethics. Make sure you're telling the truth is a good idea, because someone will find out that you're not, and then you've got a problem. Trust is the biggest commodity that we trade in. If people don't trust you, they don't buy you. If people don't trust you, they don't use you.
Although there's a lot of education to be done in the corporate world about what makes a good story. Full disclosure, Microsoft is a client of Click to Views. If you want to watch the full interview with Geoff, please click on the card above or hit the URL below. Now, as I said, I worked with Stephen 20 years ago covering Australian politics in Canberra. He's since gone on to a glittering career covering media all over the world. And we're talking about the decline of traditional media brands and the rise of the personal brand.
Those sites which were free and wanted to survive, firstly off clicks and then selling advertising against their large readerships, but also for doing sponsored segments and native content, have really massively retreated from where they were, say, even just 5 years ago.
And a new middle class, so to speak.
I think you will see a rise in low overhead single journalist enterprises, for example, proliferate, It's just whether they catch a rising tide and turn into the Joe Rogans of this world or not. A few will, but they'll be the lucky ones.
If you want to watch the full video with Stephen, please click in the card in the top corner or look out for the URL below. To wrap up, I found out last week that the first newspaper I ever worked for full-time back in 1994, Tasmanian Country, an agricultural weekly in my home state of Tasmania, was shutting its doors, and it was a sad time. Working there taught me pretty much like all I know about journalism and some things about life. For instance, I told a story to talk my way into the job without knowing anything about agriculture. The story was that when I was an 8-year-old, I went into the greasy pig competition at the Campbelltown Agricultural Show. Now, the greasy pig competition is something that is just not done anymore because it involves getting a young pig and covering it with grease and letting kids run around the pen trying to catch it, like grabbing a salmon in a stream. Regional newspapers in Australia seem to be going the way of the greasy pig competition. But am I sad? Well, yes. I had some great times. I learned how to find a scoop, spent many hours talking to Tasmanian farmers about their enterprises, their properties, and all such a passionate, tight-knit community. But I'm just excited. All the things we're talking about today are going to transform the world of media, the world that I've worked in all my life. And it's just going to be fascinating to see what happens over the next 10 years. The last 8 weeks have been amazing. McKinsey just came out with a report that stated that we've had 5 years of digital transformation crammed into the last 8 weeks. And coming up, David and Artur and I are going to talk about that and the future of content marketing in the current climate, and also go through our branded content video picks of the week. Coming up. And we're back with Artur Akhmetzyanov, our scripted content director and Singapore's most famous Russian comedian.
Hello.
And David Austin, Click2View's editorial content director. How are you guys?
Fine, thanks. How are you, Simon?
I'm very well, and we've reopened. This is amazing.
Yay, and we're still...
Can you tell?
No. Phase one. I went into the office and put up our QR code yesterday. That was it.
Well,
did you check in? Did you check in and check out by yourself?
Absolutely. I'm a stringent rule follower.
That's good, right? I thought you would say like I am a Singaporean PR and I would like it to remain that way.
That too. So this week we are talking about content marketing after COVID, as various economies start reopening, and what I found interesting was this McKinsey report that said, was it something like 3 years of digital transformation took place in 8 weeks as a result of the lockdowns.
5 years.
5 years
of consumer and business digital adoption in a matter of around 8 weeks. So yeah, it's an enormous shift. And in fact, we did our own digital transformation over the last month. So I'm glad we took advantage of that time.
Well, that is true, and I guess one thing is to keep it up now that we move on. And the messaging from the government here is that there's not likely to be anything more in terms of a treatment or a vaccine for some time yet. So we're going to have to get used to living this way for a while. What I find interesting is where's content marketing going to go? Digital content should be part of this transformation.
Absolutely. Yeah, and referring to that McKinsey report, it confirmed a lot of our suspicions of what we thought, where we thought the trends were going. Some of their research shows that like 75% of people who were using digital channels for the first time are indicating that they're going to continue to use them when things return to normal, whatever that is. And so now's the time that companies need to make sure their digital channels are on par or better with their competitors. For a lot of companies that are like our clients in the B2B field, for example, in the US over this lockdown period time, the banking sector saw their digital adoption of their channels go up 21%, and groceries, which makes even more sense, 31% more time spent on those industries' digital channels.
Well, and how do you engage and drive people to digital channels and engage them while they're there?
Mm-hmm.
Content.
Exactly. And it's also, if you look at in our confidential this week, you don't want to overlook the importance of SEO this time.
I've always had a soft spot for SEO because I mean, when you actually want something, that's where you go. That's where you're searching. All the rest of this, this entire programmatic advertising business. Yet when you actually have that purchase intent, it's on a search engine that it's your first port of call.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why they're saying that Amazon is kind of turning into a new search engine. We know that YouTube is like the second largest search engine in the world, right? Because a lot of people will go directly to YouTube and search how to or whatever because they know that there is so much content there. But for more, how Google like to call it, intent-driven searches, right? That's something that can be done now directly on Amazon, for example, and then. Like if you will still end up in Amazon, why not search directly there instead of Google and then Amazon, right? So there are a lot of interesting trends, and I guess the more we see this shift to the digital only format, the more trends will appear.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're actually just going to have to see over the next month or two how that evolves in the content marketing landscape, though, because I suspect digital channels have increased for those areas that need or kind of ready to go, and a lot of other businesses have been sitting back and thinking, okay, well, what do we do now and during this period? And they at some point they're going to press the go button in the next month.
The same like in the world, we see the wealth gap growing. I think we might see a similar content gap, because there will be probably some companies who are super advanced and they've been publishing a lot. I would guess that most of them are more consumer brands because that's where they chat to their consumer audiences. But there are so many conservative and traditional businesses in B2B space, in manufacturing, that probably now really going through some sort of disruptions, right? And they are moving to digital. And I think they're almost like kids learning to walk again, right? The whole landscape, the whole toolkit that is available is a very new concept for them.
I know the topic of our next blog now, the content gap.
There you go. Very good. Yeah, Artur, I think a lot of these companies, not only are they having to redefine how they're going to do business, but then as they have these new business models, they're going to figure out how are they going to talk to these new customers, and how are they going to relate to them. And I think it's a total reset for a lot of these companies, which is a good opportunity for people in the content marketing space.
Like us,
coincidentally.
And I think that it refers not only to external communications, but also internal communications. Yesterday, I read an article from some Russian recruiter, and she was talking about how this digital transformation disruption is affecting the future of the landscape. And she just sees the very interesting trends. Like some people are almost like in shock. They know that they're going to lose their jobs, but they're not actively searching as they used to during the previous financial crisis. And then also it will affect, for example, in Russia, there is a big difference between Moscow and all the other regions in terms of like the scale of the companies, the salaries, etc. So I think similar trends will happen in the world as well, where you see that maybe you don't actually have to go to Silicon Valley if you want to work in a startup. You don't have to move to LA to be in the entertainment business. We will just see that there are more and more opportunities to be done remotely. And even now, I think there is a trend that more and more people are moving out of Silicon Valley, for example. So I think that there are a lot of big changes happening in the economic and social world, and it's going to be interesting how this all affects us.
Yeah, I think the digital things hit the digital transformation because it was already, a river flowing downstream. That what McKinsey says is right, and we will have leapfrogged years ahead. I'm less convinced about the whole remote work and everyone's going to live in the countryside thing. I think that might be a bit of a flash in the pan with this same same is supposedly happening in Australia. But you know, Google, for instance, for years has allowed a very generous working from home policy. But when they studied where all their best ideas came from and all of their best, most productive work came from, it actually came from teams working together in an office.
And I think also from the career point of view, I think the promotion, like the career growth, I think that the research shows that actually people who are in the office, they will have high chances to get promoted and get more responsibilities versus those who are working remotely. So there are a lot of interesting aspects that will be affecting the workplace of the future, and then of course the communications that appear in this space.
Yeah, definitely. So Artur, you were saying before, because you review hundreds and hundreds of branded video channels every week, there's a lot of shit out there.
Yeah, that's quite a harsh assessment. I mean, I'm sure the brands that invest money and publish all of this stuff.
Let's see if anyone watches this far into the YouTube video. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of well-intentioned work being done, but as you said about the content gap, there are brands that are clearly putting out content consistently, like we talked about last week, like week in, week out, brand new content, and of really high quality. I mean, that's and so in our list we see the same brands popping up all the time, because they're not only publishing regularly, they're publishing really great stuff and
quality.
Absolutely.
And I think that's again just like practice, right? The more you do something, the better you become. So I guess if you really publish a video a week, clearly you will learn something, and in a couple of years you will be way ahead in comparison to maybe some of your competitors who are just jumping on this video marketing trend.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, you got to, and just that. It's a real commitment to that consistency in publishing. And one of the great ones is Lego, of course. And so this video, I think what they're really good at is not thinking with that promotional mindset. They're actually thinking, you know, what do our fans, our customers, wonder about the products? And so this video is just about how they make the little Lego men, which actually weirdly, you know, I've always sort of wondered how they put them together, and now we know.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, that's kind of the core of the content marketing, right? You basically start by asking what your audience is interested in, and then you kind of build all these assets around that. But this video is mesmerizing. It's basically just music. There is no voiceover or something. You're just watching how these robots collect 6 pair of legs every second or whatever it is. It's just fascinating how everything is so automated. And I guess that's the scale that you are always impressed by.
Exactly. And another one from a regular favorite of ours. There were 2 picks this week, which I really liked. This Porsche one, and another one from Motul about the reconstruction of this old truck, which we haven't featured in this week's newsletter. But the Porsche one is and Porsche does these all over the world. We're actually talking to them about producing some in Singapore at the moment. They're just driver stories.
Yes. Again, like personal stories, the customer stories, they're the best ones who use your brand, and they're the ones who will be promoting it in the most sincere way. And I mean, it's clearly not surprising that week in, week out, car manufacturing brands are usually the ones who publish most, and the quality is one of the highest. And again, like they show the car, it looks amazing. The cinematography is amazing, but it's just the sincere passion and love of the owner that really kind of brings it. I think it's like almost a 4-minute video, but you're just listening to this guy really just basically just saying I love you for 4 minutes, and it's amazing.
Yeah, but it's not completely sort of just bland idolatry. It's you know, he's got an interesting story to tell.
Yeah.
So another regular contributor to this list is Huawei, but this one is it's beautiful. Artistically, I really like it. It's a bit weird saying how they don't copy and steal, which I'm sure they don't. But it's like, and given all the political stuff going on around Huawei, you kind of feel sorry for them having to put this video out. So it's a slightly odd piece of branded content.
I think PR guys got involved, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because the darkness of the tones and the stop motion, it does actually make it look a little bit sinister.
And it was a very interesting choice of the medium, because they went for this stop motion with a detective, but this sort of noir detective style is usually investigation of someone who really committed the crime, right? But this is, as we were discussing it with David as well before that, it looks like some sort of propaganda, right?
Yeah, it does have that feel about it. And finally, no, not finally. We've got a couple more to go. This one, Upsides. After our animation episode last week, which I really enjoyed. This one is lovely, because it's just talking about some positives in this whole pandemic, but it's also just it's beautifully made and sort of features a lot of the the trendy elements in animation at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we see that there are already like parodies on what most brands publish about COVID, right? It's like black and white, gentle piano music that sounds similar to hundreds of videos. And I think instead of this sort of maybe cheesy heartstring approach, I think this is just a very cute one that focuses more on the actual facts. And it's like just really mini snippets of what happens. It's cute and a bit of nostalgic again with grain and nice style.
And then there's a Cisco one, which is totally inspiring. It's a really great effort from some of the engineers at Cisco, making use of some equipment that was lying idle because of the lockdown and producing face masks.
Yeah, despite being a huge company, very lean startup approach where you just test, iterate while you're still delivering, hearing the feedback. And at the end of the day, we see the photos of the hospital workers, right, who are surprised to get this help, and they definitely appreciate it the most.
Finally, given all of the additional trouble in the world at the moment, the protests in America after the death of George Floyd, a lot of brands have come out and made statements in support of the protesters, making very clear their opposition to racism. And Nike has done a beautiful one, flipping their brand sort of identity on its head as well.
Yeah, I think, as they said, I think maybe it's once in a while type of thing where they say you just don't do it, right? And again, like it's one of those minimalistic but very powerful ones.
Exactly. Well, guys, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. That's episode 13 of The Content Show. Who would have thought we'd make it? Thank you.